So a Florida fisherman saved a teenage girl from drowning by using his drone, of all things. Then an ultramarathon mom won a 100K race just 6 months after giving birth and even nursed her daughter at every checkpoint along the way. And in the midst of severe storm disasters, a 9-year-old daughter's gut feeling saved her entire family. In today's episode of Better Day News, I'm going to talk about all that and more. This channel is dedicated to focusing on the positive news stories from around the world rather than the negative, with one simple goal in mind: trying to make your day just a little bit better. First up, a shark fisherman in Florida saved a teen girl from drowning using a drone as she struggled fighting a rip current at Pensacola Beach. This story is pretty crazy. The fisherman's name is Andrew Smith, and he uses his drone to cast bait, but this time he used it to help save this girl's life. Here's what went down. She got pulled away by a rip current and was struggling to make it back to shore, nearly 100 yards out at this point, so someone that was with this girl, friend, family member, ran looking for help and found Andrew Smith. The craziest part of the story, aside from a life being saved, is that Smith reportedly struggles with a seizure disorder that prevents him from setting bait for sharks like a typical fisherman would via their kayak. Instead, he uses a drone to do it because the seizure disorder prevents him from being able to go into the water at all. Andrew also clocked out of work that day and left the beach, but a friend convinced him to come back. So he just so happened to be around when this teenage girl got pulled out by the rip current and a friend or family member of hers ran looking for help. Well, this other girl just so happened to find Andrew Smith, asking if he could swim and help get her friend or family member out of the ocean. But Smith obviously said no, since he can't swim. However, he did have his drone, so instead of using it to drop bait, he had an idea to use it to drop a flotation device. So they hooked one up and flew the drone over her, releasing the device. Well, the first attempt missed pretty badly as he was too high up and the wind took the flotation device out of the teenage girl's reach. He was getting pretty nervous by this point as he flew the drone back to land, but get this, a bystander saw what was going on and actually brought Smith over a second flotation device. So with time running out, they hooked the device up and rushed the drone back out there. And this time, he lowered it all the way down until he saw her grab it, then released it. The girl was then thankfully able to stay afloat with that device until first responders arrived. EMS later told the fisherman that if he didn't get her that device, she would not have survived. She'd already been struggling to stay afloat for roughly 5 minutes by the time he completed his second attempt, and so Andrew Smith saved a teenage girl's life without having to even get into the water. The girl's father called Smith a guardian angel, and I can't lie, this gave me chills watching and reading about. And then an extremely determined 42-year-old mother won an ultramarathon only 6 months after giving birth, and she even breastfed her 6-month-old daughter on her breaks during this race. This sounds made up because completing a 100K ultra trail race in just under 17 hours is already impressive, but using 3 stops during this time to nurse a baby takes things to an entirely different level. According to Western Missouri Medical Center, the metabolic energy needed to breastfeed a baby each day is the amount you would use to walk 7 miles, and then just producing breast milk consumes 25% of the body's energy. So for the body of Stephanie Case to be spending that much energy for her baby, plus winning the Ultra Trail Snowdonia, is one of the most impressive things I've seen in a long time. Stephanie Case is a Canadian human rights lawyer and ultra runner who now lives in France, and in recent years had to spend 3 entire years away from running after struggling with fertility issues. She sadly suffered 2 miscarriages and actually had to go through 3 rounds of IVF before a successful pregnancy took place. Then once Stephanie successfully delivered her baby, she decided to put her running shoes back on and started running again just 6 weeks later. From there, she signed up for the Ultra Trail Snowdonia in Wales, which is a race that features technical trails, tough climbs, and an elevation gain of 21,000 feet and spans 100 kilometers. So this is far from a straight shot, more quote-unquote easy style of a 100K, if you can use the word easy and 100K in the same sentence. On top of that, since Stephanie hadn't ran in a few years, she had no UTMB index. In simple terms, this meant she had no score to indicate where she could start in the field, and because of that, she was placed in the 3rd and last starting wave. That meant she had hundreds hundreds of runners in front of her out on the trail and had to start 30 minutes behind the first group of elite runners. So Stephanie shows up, starts at the back of the pack, and at her 2 aid checkpoints, breastfed her daughter Pepper, then got 1 extra checkpoint granted exclusively to feed Pepper with no aid at all for herself, and won the entire race. That is incredible, and this is pretty wild as well. She had that extra checkpoint to nurse Pepper, so 3 checkpoints instead of the standard 2, yet her aid station time was still less than that of the second and third place finishers. Now, to be clear, Stephanie is a seasoned veteran that spent over a decade as an ultra runner, so it's not like she's out there just starting from scratch, but still, 3 years off and just 6 months postpartum is an insane accomplishment. And get this, she said that she signed up for the Ultra Trail Snowdonia as a practice run to shake out the cobwebs as she prepared for a 100-mile race this July in Colorado. Well, she definitely defied the odds, finishing in spite of having to slow down near the end due to late-stage nausea and dry heaving, probably from taking over 3 years off, but also because her body was spent after having to nurse her baby all along the way during this nearly 17-hour race. When she finished this race, she thought she kept up with a pretty good pace and maybe managed to finish top 5. But when she found out she won, she was in disbelief and just kept asking the question, "I really won?" Well, after the disbelief wore off, she had this to say: "I'm incredibly happy if what I did this past weekend has helped to inspire other new moms, but I just want to make sure it doesn't feed into this narrative that moms have to and should be doing it all." She later went on to explain that doing it all could mean keeping yourself healthy and happy and keeping your baby healthy and happy. That's it. That's enough. Next up, so far this year, severe weather has been on the uptick with nearly 900 tornadoes in various severity, tearing through more than 30 states in the United States so far. This is on the upper end of what is typical by this point, with some reports saying this is the most tornadoes through May since the year 2011. And while severe storms like this come with a lot of destruction and sadness via tornadoes as properties are destroyed and lives are lost, I wanted to highlight a couple heartwarming stories in the midst of the chaos. The first is a story of a Kentucky woman whose house was leveled by a tornado, and she initially could not find her 2-year-old son. The mother's name is Tara Holyfield, and she was aware that there were storms in the area. In fact, she stayed up awake while her 2-year-old Parker was sound asleep. This happened around 11:30 p.m. The problem was their internet went out earlier in the day, and then she has very poor cell service in the area, so she never got the tornado warning alert. So the EF4 tornado that was barreling toward her neighborhood in London, Kentucky almost caught her by complete surprise. She actually told Fox Weather that the people who tried to warn her couldn't reach her, and she knew the tornado was close because, quote, she heard it coming. It all happened so fast. As she was reacting to hearing the roar of the tornado, her house was hit before she could get anybody to safety, and from there, she was thrown up into the air and debris was scattered everywhere. Well, thankfully, she was able to immediately jump up upon impact, and of course was then frantically trying to find her 2-year-old son, Parker. Initially, she had no idea where Parker was. Obviously, the worst fear was her son not making it through this, but she heard him crying and followed the cries until she was able to locate him and was then successfully able to pull him from the debris. The miraculous part about this story is, aside from being shook up and some minor scrapes, Parker is otherwise okay. His mom Tara needed some stitches, but she is doing fine per reports, and they were even able to find and rescue her dog Newt. Now, truth be told, many others did lose their lives that day, so I'm not going to pretend like this wasn't a very tragic ordeal, but this family in particular, along with some others in the area, was able to survive, and their story in particular was basically a miracle. And then this story is a bit older than the one I just shared, but back in March, a 9-year-old girl saved her family by insisting they leave their house shortly before it got destroyed by a tornado. Here's the crazy part about all this. The family had never left their home before and instead rode out every storm and tornado warning prior. This time was different though, with Kelsey Webb, that's the mother, deciding to evacuate their home after her 9-year-old daughter Aaliyah woke up and told them they need to leave. Kelsey told her daughter it's going to be okay. They've stayed through several tornadoes before, but this time her daughter would not take no for an answer, and from there, her daughter's persistence combined with a gut feeling that Kelsey herself felt, she felt like they needed to get in that car and drive to her brother's house. So that's exactly what they did, huddling together in the bathtub of her brother's bathroom. Well, minutes after that, their home got completely destroyed. The house they left, not her brothers. They were all safe and sound at her brother's house. Well, Kelsey and Aaliyah later went back to their house with the media, and she stood where her room would have been, and it was completely demolished. Obviously, they were glad they followed their gut, because if they hadn't, 9-year-old Aaliyah said they wouldn't be alive right now. And that is probably a good reminder to stay alert and aware during tornado season if you live in Tornado Alley or anywhere storms like that could take place, because it can turn serious very quickly. I've personally grown up in the Midwest my entire life, and so tornado warnings typically mean, oh, let's go outside and see what's going on. But stories like these are a good reminder that things can quickly go from it's fine, let's just go look outside, to disaster very quickly. Anyway, that's all I have for you today on our first ever episode of Better Day News, but I'll be back with more positive and uplifting stories from around the world in the next week.